hatred rarely shows itself openly. When it comes from someone close, a friend, a family member, a partner, it often disguises itself beneath masks of politeness, concern, or even affection. The psyche is cunning. What cannot be admitted consciously leaks out unconsciously through tone, gesture, silence, or subtle sabotage. Jung would say that such hidden hostility is a projection of the shadow, the denied aspects of the other's psyche spilling into relationship. And when you are its target, you sense it not with logic, but with intuition, a coldness behind the smile, a bitterness beneath the compliment, a heaviness that lingers after their presence. To recognize these signs is not to become paranoid, but to cultivate awareness. The unconscious always reveals itself, even when carefully concealed. By learning to see through masks, you protect yourself from the corrosive effects of secret resentment. You also begin to understand that hatred is rarely about you alone. It is about the other's unintegrated shadow. Their hostility, hidden though it may be, tells the story of what they cannot face within themselves. To see it clearly is the first step toward freedom from its influence. Hidden hatred often appears not in direct aggression, but through subtle projections, small gestures, tones, and words that, when seen in isolation, seem harmless, yet together create a pattern that reveals unconscious hostility. Jung observed that what the psyche refuses to admit is never destroyed. It is displaced, projected, and expressed in disguised forms. When someone close harbors hatred, but cannot admit it either, because their persona requires them to appear loving, or because they themselves cannot face the shadow of resentment, they project that energy outward, often onto the very person to whom they are bound. The result is a relationship that feels confusing, full of contradictions, words of support paired with tones of contempt, gestures of concern laced with envy, humor that cuts rather than uplifts, silence that punishes rather than comforts. The hatred is never confessed, but it is always present, seeping through the cracks of the unconscious. One of the most common disguises of hidden hatred is envy masked as care. A friend may seem concerned when you succeed, but their words carry subtle diminishment. They congratulate you, but quickly remind you of the risks, the flaws, the potential for failure. On the surface, they appear supportive, but beneath the mask, envy corrodes their heart. They cannot rejoice in your success because it reminds them of their own inadequacy. So their shadow projects resentment onto you. Instead of celebrating, they dampen, and instead of affirming, they undercut. Over time, you leave such interactions feeling smaller, less certain, less joyful. This is the mark of projected hatred disguised as care. It drains rather than nourishes, constricts rather than expands. Another disguise is hostility veiled in humor, sarcasm, teasing, and jokes can carry unconscious aggression, especially when they repeat in patterns. A family member might make light-hearted comments about your choices, your appearance, or your mistakes, always insisting they mean no harm. But the repeated cutting edge reveals something deeper. Humor becomes a socially acceptable outlet for feelings they cannot admit directly. The projection of their shadow, hostility, slips through the mask of laughter, so that the hatred is denied even as it wounds. You may doubt yourself, wondering if you are being too sensitive, but your psyche feels the sting. The unconscious always leaks into the atmosphere, and the body knows it even when the mind tries to rationalize it away. Silence can also be a powerful form of hidden hatred. Withdrawal of affection, refusal to engage, or subtle exclusion can communicate hostility more effectively than words. Someone close may stop celebrating your presence, may withdraw warmth while maintaining outward politeness. The silence is not neutral, it is charged heavy, meant to punish or diminish. This is often how resentment manifests in those who cannot admit anger. Instead of confrontation, they retreat into passive aggression, making absence itself into a weapon. The projection here is clear. They cannot admit their hatred, so they deny you affirmation, projecting their unresolved conflict into the void between you. The result is a relationship that feels cold, distant, inexplicably heavy, even though no direct hostility is ever spoken. Projection is the key mechanism in all of these disguises. The one who secretly hates you does not usually admit, even to themselves, the intensity of their feeling. To preserve their persona, the mask of being caring, loyal, or loving, they exile the hatred into the shadow. But the shadow refuses silence. It finds its way out, attaching itself to behaviors that can be plausibly denied. They say they're only joking, only caring, only tired, but the unconscious truth lies in the effect. You feel diminished, unsettled, or drained. Hatred disguised as humor. Care or silence is never about the stated words. It is about the energy that seeps through them. It is crucial to see these signs not as isolated incidents, but as patterns. One sarcastic comment does not reveal hatred, nor does one act of concern that feels slightly off. But when the same dynamic repeats over and over, when care always feels suffocating, when jokes always cut rather than uplift, when silence always withdraws love, the pattern reveals the shadow at work. The unconscious cannot help but reveal itself through consistency. Hatred may be hidden, but it leaves footprints. And those footprints are the effects you consistently feel in the relationship. Hidden hatred also often appears in subtle forms of sabotage. Someone close may discourage your goals, not overtly, but by planting seeds of doubt. They may forget to support you in small ways, neglect to show up when it matters, or subtly undermine your confidence. These behaviors, though small, accumulate into a messagey. Your growth threatens them, and their unconscious hostility responds by trying to contain you. The sabotage is rarely acknowledged, for to do so would shatter their persona of loyalty or love. But the projection is clear. Their shadow envy or resentment transforms into actions that keep you bound, restricted, or uncertain. In some cases, hidden hatred emerges as excessive politeness. This may seem paradoxical, but when someone cannot bear to admit hostility, they may overcompensate with exaggerated kindness, careful manners, or excessive compliments. Yet beneath the surface, you feel the dissonance. The words are sweet, but the tone is cold. The smile is wide, but the eyes are distant. The unconscious cannot fake warmth. It always leaks into the atmosphere. Excessive politeness can be a mask for hostility that cannot be admitted. The person is not relating to you authentically, but performing a role to conceal what they cannot acknowledge. The body often detects what the mind cannot. When someone close secretly hates you, you may feel tense in their presence, drained after interactions without knowing why. Your intuition picks up on the unconscious projections, even if your logic cannot explain them. This is because the psyche communicates not only through words, but through atmosphere. Hatred, even when hidden, creates a field of energy that the unconscious of the other detects. This is why Jung emphasized the importance of listening to intuition. It perceives what the rational mind denies. If you consistently feel diminished, unsettled, or unsafe around someone, even if their words appear supportive, it is likely that hidden hatred is at work. It is also important to remember that hidden hatred is rarely about you alone. It is the projection of the other's shadow, the qualities they cannot bear, in themselves cast onto you. If they hate their own vulnerability, they may resent your openness. If they despise their own failures, they may diminish your successes. If they cannot face their own envy, they may cloak it as concern for your choices. Their hatred is a mirror of what they have not integrated. Recognizing this does not excuse their behavior, but it prevents you from internalizing their hostility as a reflection of your worth. Their shadow is being played out through you, but it is their shadow, not your essence. The tragedy of hidden hatred in close relationships is that it corrodes trust. You want to believe in the loyalty of friends, the love of family, the support of partners. When hatred hides behind care or humor, it creates confusion, making you question your own perception. But clarity begins when you recognize projection for what it is. To see that hidden hatred appears through disguised forms is to reclaim your intuition, to stop doubting the signals of your own psyche by naming the disguise. Envy masked as care, hostility masked as humor, resentment masked as silence. You strip the projection of its power. The work of individuation requires this discernment. To become whole, you must see not only your own shadow, but also the shadows projected onto you by others. By recognizing hidden hatred, you protect your psyche from being entangled in another's unresolved conflicts. You no longer absorb their hostility as self-condemnation, but see it as the expression of their unconscious. This awareness allows you to set boundaries, to respond with clarity, and to free yourself from the corrosive effects of disguised resentment. Hidden hatred thrives in silence and denial, but it loses power when it is seen, named, and understood as projection. Thus, hidden hatred, though cloaked in care, humor, or silence, is always discernible to the attentive soul. It reveals itself in patterns, in atmospheres, in the subtle ways you are made to feel smaller, weaker, or unsafe. To see it clearly is not to grow paranoid, but to awaken. It is to understand that the unconscious cannot remain hidden forever, that the shadow always leaks into relationship, and that awareness is the first step toward freedom from its corrosive power. Intuition detects what logic cannot, because the unconscious always reveals itself in subtle ways, even when carefully concealed behind masks of civility or affection. When someone close to you secretly harbors hatred, it is rarely announced in words, but it is felt in the atmosphere, in the tone of a conversation, in the fleeting glance, in the heaviness that lingers after they leave the room. Logic, trained to analyze facts and accept appearances, is easily deceived by the mask. But intuition perceives what is unspoken, sensing the energy beneath gestures and words. Jung emphasized that the unconscious communicates not only through dreams and symbols, but also through subtle impressions, bodily sensations, and instincts. When you feel uneasy around someone, despite their polite words, when you sense coldness in a smile that looks warm, your intuition is perceiving the unconscious truth that logic alone cannot grasp. The difficulty lies in the mind's tendency to dismiss intuition. You tell yourself you are overreacting, that you are being too sensitive, that you must accept people at face value. Society trains us to privilege rational explanations and to ignore subtle impressions. Yet those impressions are often the most accurate signals of the unconscious at work. Someone may insist they support you, yet you feel deflated in their presence. Someone may laugh at your success, yet their laughter carries a sharpness that unsettles you. Someone may hug you warmly, yet you feel no true warmth in the embrace. These contradictions confuse logic, but resonate clearly with intuition. The unconscious leaks into the smallest details: tone, body language, atmosphere, and intuition perceives these leaks even when the conscious mind resists acknowledging them. Tone of voice is one of the clearest channels through which hidden hatred emerges. Words may be carefully chosen to appear supportive, but tone reveals the truth. A congratulation delivered flatly, an apology spoken with sarcasm, a compliment wrapped in irony. All of these betray unconscious hostility. Logic focuses on the words and accepts them as truth. But intuition hears the discord. You sense the sharpness, the lack of sincerity, the underlying hostility. This is why you sometimes leave conversations with a vague unease, unable to explain why you feel diminished despite having heard nothing overtly cruel. The unconscious, of course, communicates through tone, and intuition recognizes it long before the rational mind does. Gestures and expressions also reveal what logic cannot capture. A subtle eye roll, a fleeting smirk, a look that lingers too long on your failures. These are the ways unconscious hatred slips through the mask. Such gestures are often denied by the person themselves, for they are not deliberate but unconscious. Yet they reveal more than words ever could. Intuition reads these micro-expressions, catching the shadow in the space of a second. You may not consciously register them, but your body reacts. You feel tension, discomfort, or fatigue. This bodily reaction is intuition's voice, alerting you to the presence of hostility beneath the mask of closeness. Atmosphere is another medium of the unconscious. Hidden hatred creates a heaviness in the air, an unspoken tension that fills the space between you and the other. Even in silence, you feel it, the absence of warmth, the presence of judgment, the unspoken hostility. Logic, searching for evidence, cannot find it, for nothing concrete has been said or done. Yet intuition knows. You sense that something is off, that the relationship does not nourish but drains. This atmosphere is the unconscious speaking, and intuition is the faculty that hears its language. The body itself often becomes the first receiver of intuition. You may feel tightness in your chest when the person enters the room, exhaustion after spending time with them, or anxiety before meeting them. These are not random sensations, but embodied perceptions of unconscious hostility. The psyche does not lie. It registers the energy of hidden hatred, even when the conscious mind refuses to admit it. To forgive yourself for sensing these things is essential, for too often people dismiss their own bodies as unreliable. Yet the body is a vessel of intuition, and its reactions are often truer than logical reasoning. Dreams can also signal the presence of hidden hatred. If you repeatedly dream of someone close in roles of betrayal, hostility, or aggression, the unconscious may be revealing what you sense intuitively, but cannot admit consciously. Dreams dramatize the hidden dynamics of relationships, stripping away masks to reveal archetypal truths. A friend who appears loving in waking life may appear as a trickster or enemy in dreams, not because they are consciously malicious, but because their unconscious hostility is being revealed to your unconscious mind. Intuition and dreams work together, bypassing logic to communicate what cannot be openly admitted. Intuition is often dismissed because it lacks proof, but proof is the currency of logic, not of the unconscious. The unconscious does not speak in evidence, but in impressions, atmospheres, and symbols. When you sense hidden hatred, you may be tempted to silence yourself because you cannot prove it. But insisting on proof before trusting intuition leaves you vulnerable to manipulation. Those who harbor secret hostility often hide behind plausible deniability. They insist their cutting jokes are harmless. Their silence is mere fatigue. Their flat tone is unintentional. Logic accepts these excuses, but intuition knows better. Trusting your intuition means accepting that not all truths can be rationally explained. Still, it is important to distinguish intuition from paranoia. Paranoia projects hostility where none exists, while intuition perceives hostility where it is disguised. The difference lies in patterns and consistency. Intuition is not triggered by one-off moments, but by repeated atmospheres, by consistent unease, by a pattern of diminishment. It is not fed by fear, but by perception. To cultivate intuition is to learn to observe these patterns without rushing to judgment, to listen to your body without being consumed by suspicion. Intuition does not demand immediate conclusions, but invites awareness. It says, something here is not aligned, something beneath the mask is speaking. Pay attention. The unconscious always reveals itself because it cannot be suppressed entirely. Jung observed that what is repressed returns, often in distorted forms. A person who secretly hates you, but refuses to admit it will inevitably leak that hatred through slips of the tongue, jokes, tone, gestures, or atmosphere. Intuition detects these leaks, even if logic dismisses them. By honoring intuition, you align yourself with the reality of the unconscious, rather than being deceived by the persona. You stop gaslighting yourself into doubting your perceptions, and you begin to trust the wisdom of your psyche. The importance of intuition in detecting hidden hatred lies not only in protecting yourself, but also in understanding the other. When you sense hostility beneath care, envy beneath support, resentment beneath humor, you are witnessing the projection of their shadow. This recognition allows you to avoid personalizing their hostility. Instead of asking, what is wrong with me? You begin to ask, what in their shadow is being projected onto me. This shift frees you from internalizing their hidden hatred as self. Condemnation. Intuition, thus, becomes not only a warning system, but also a guide to psychological insight. To ignore intuition is to risk entanglement. Many people who suffer betrayal later recall that they always knew something was off, but dismissed their feelings. They trusted logic over intuition, appearances over atmosphere, words over tone. By the time proof appeared, the damage had been done. Intuition, when honored, prevents such entanglement by alerting you early. It allows you to set boundaries, to create distance, to protect your psyche before the hostility erupts openly. This is not paranoia, but wisdom to act on subtle knowledge rather than waiting for rational evidence that may arrive too late. Developing trust in intuition requires practice. It means paying attention to bodily sensations, to moods that shift in another's presence, to dreams that carry hidden messages. It means noticing when you leave an interaction feeling drained rather than nourished, diminished rather than affirmed. It means keeping track of patterns rather than dismissing each moment as trivial. The unconscious always reveals itself, but only those attuned to intuition. Notice its language. Logic will insist on facts, but intuition whispers truth, and the soul must learn to listen. Ultimately, intuition's gift is clarity. It pierces through masks, revealing what words conceal. It prevents you from being blinded by appearances, from being manipulated by those who project hostility while performing affection. It reconnects you to the wisdom of the unconscious, reminding you that the psyche perceives far more than the rational mind admits. When someone close secretly hates you, logic may dismiss your unease, but intuition knows. To honor that knowing is to protect yourself, to free yourself from confusion, and to live aligned with the deeper truth that the unconscious always speaks, even when hidden. Recognizing secret hatred is less about blaming others and more about understanding the shadow at work. Both in them and within yourself, the instinctive response when you sense hidden hostility is to turn outward in accusation, to fixate on the wrong done to you, or to label the other person as false, envious, or malicious. Yet, Jung's psychology urges a deeper view. The hostility you encounter in another may indeed be real, but its source often lies in the integrated parts of their psyche, their shadow, the qualities they cannot admit in themselves. What you are experiencing is not only personal dislike, but the eruption of their unconscious into the field of your relationship. To recognize this is to move beyond blame into insight, to see that what is happening reveals not just the truth about them, but also the workings of the human psyche in general. The shadow is the sum of everything the conscious personality rejects or denies. It contains impulses that do not fit the persona. The socially acceptable mask, one, presence to the world. A person who prides themselves on being kind may repress anger, only for it to emerge as passive aggression. A person who clings to an image of loyalty may repress envy, only for it to slip out as subtle sabotage. When you sense hidden hatred from someone close, you are witnessing the projection of their shadow. They cast onto you what they cannot face in themselves. Their envy becomes criticism disguised as humor. Their insecurity becomes dismissal of your achievements. Their anger becomes cold silence. To understand this is to free yourself from the illusion that their hostility is entirely about you. It is not your essence they hate, but the reflection of their own disowned qualities. Projection is the mechanism by which the shadow operates. What cannot be admitted within is seen in others. A person who despises their own weakness may ridicule yours. One who denies their ambition may resent your success. One who refuses to face their fear may accuse you of cowardice. These projections feel personal because they are directed at you, but in truth they are impersonal, rooted in the structure of the psyche. To recognize this is to shift from personalizing to observing. Instead of asking, why do they hate me? You begin to ask, what in them is being projected onto me? This shift breaks the cycle of self, blame, and resentment. It allows you to see hidden hatred not as a final verdict on your worth, but as a revelation of the other's inner conflict. Yet Jung also warned that what you notice in others often mirrors what you have not yet integrated in yourself. To recognize hidden hatred only in others is to risk blindness to your own shadow. The hostility you sense may trigger such strong reactions in you precisely because it resonates with something unresolved within. If you have not faced your own envy, the envy of another wounds you more deeply. If you deny your own aggression, the passive aggression of another unsettles you more powerfully. If you have not forgiven your own failures, the mockery of another cuts more sharply. Recognizing hidden hatred, therefore, is always an invitation to self-reflection. What is being revealed in them may also be a mirror of what remains unacknowledged in you. This does not mean you are to blame for their hostility, but it means that every encounter with another shadow is an opportunity to face your own. Relationships act as mirrors of the unconscious, bringing to light what would otherwise remain hidden. When you feel the sting of hidden hatred, you are called to examine not only the other's shadow, but also your own. What within you is reacting so strongly? What qualities in you are you still reluctant to embrace? Where might you also project disowned parts of yourself onto others? In this way, recognizing hidden hatred becomes part of the larger process of individuation, the journey toward integrating the full reality of the psyche. Blaming others for their hostility may feel satisfying in the short term, but it keeps you bound to a superficial view of human relationships. Jung's perspective teaches that the psyche is always at work, beneath appearances. What looks like personal hatred may actually be an archetypal drama, the eternal tension between persona and shadow, light and dark, projection and reality. By seeing hidden hatred through this lens, you gain freedom. You no longer waste energy in resentment or in futile attempts to change the other. Instead, you observe, you understand, and you decide how to respond without being ensnared. Awareness replaces blame, and clarity replaces confusion. When you recognize the shadow at work in another, compassion becomes possible. The one who secretly hates you is often tormented by their own unconscious, enslaved by forces they cannot acknowledge. Their hostility is a symptom of their suffering, not merely of malice. To see this does not mean you must accept mistreatment or remain entangled in toxic relationships. But it softens your perspective. Instead of seeing them as purely evil, you recognize them as human, flawed, fragmented, struggling with the same archetypal forces that you yourself must face. This recognition grants you both discernment and distance. You can set boundaries without hatred, protect yourself without bitterness, and even, when possible, extend understanding without illusion. Recognizing your own shadow is equally liberating. To admit that you, too, are capable of envy, resentment. Hostility does not condemn you, it makes you more whole. The ego resists this admission, clinging to an image of goodness or innocence. But this resistance keeps the shadow powerful, for what is denied grows stronger in the unconscious. By facing your own capacity for hatred, you disarm it. You no longer need to project it onto others, nor are you as easily wounded when others project onto you. Self-knowledge shields you, for when you know your own depths, the shadows of others cannot confuse you as easily. The practice of recognizing shadow in both self and other is subtle. It requires attentiveness to the small details, the unease you feel in another's presence, the sharpness of their jokes, the heaviness of their silence. It also requires honesty about your own reactions. Why do their words sting so deeply? Why do you replay their comments in your mind? Why do you feel compelled to defend yourself? Each of these moments is an invitation to observe the interplay of shadow and projection. In this way, every encounter with hidden hatred becomes an opportunity for growth, not only in understanding others, but in integrating yourself. The risk of failing to recognize the shadow is entanglement. When you take hidden hatred at face value, you may either internalize it as proof of your inadequacy or retaliate with equal hostility. In both cases, you become trapped in the unconscious drama, repeating patterns rather than transcending them. By recognizing the shadow, you break this cycle. You neither absorb their projection nor mirror it back. You step into awareness, which allows you to respond freely rather than react blindly. This is the psychological meaning of liberation, to be conscious of the forces at work rather than enslaved by them. At the deepest level, recognizing hidden hatred teaches humility. It reveals that human beings are never purely light, nor purely dark. Every soul carries both, and every relationship is shaped by the interplay of these opposites. To see hatred in another is to remember that you too carry the potential for it, and to see your own shadow is to remember that others too are struggling with theirs. This humility prevents arrogance, softens judgment, and fosters a more compassionate engagement with the world. It does not erase discernment. You still protect yourself from those who project hostility, but it prevents you from becoming consumed by bitterness or self-righteousness. Forgiveness in this context emerges naturally when you understand hidden hatred as the expression of shadow, both theirs and yours. Forgiveness becomes less about excusing behavior and more about integrating reality. You forgive not by forgetting, but by recognizing the truth that human beings are fragmented, that unconscious forces distort relationships, that projection is universal. Forgiveness does not erase boundaries, but it transforms resentment into understanding. You cease to be poisoned by the hatred of others because you see it for what it is, the shadow at work, and you cease to be imprisoned by your own hatred, because you integrate it rather than deny it. In this way, recognizing secret hatred becomes a path of individuation. It is not merely a defensive act to protect yourself from toxic relationships, but a spiritual act of integration. It teaches you to see through masks, to listen to intuition, to honor your perceptions, and to confront the shadows that shape human life. It calls you to honesty, to compassion, to humility, and to courage. By recognizing the shadow in others, you free yourself from illusions. By recognizing the shadow in yourself, you move closer to wholeness. Hidden hatred, painful though it is, becomes a teacher, drawing you deeper into the mystery of the psyche and the work of becoming whole.